The evening air was calm, and the sound of children's laughter echoed through the old community center. It was a small town, the kind where everyone knew each other and news spread faster than the wind. Inside the building, the smell of old wood and polish lingered. The walls were lined with faded posters of music recitals and art fairs from years ago. Every afternoon after the piano class ended, a woman in plain clothes entered quietly through the side door. Her name was Lena. Lena was not someone people noticed right away. She wore the same gray sweater most days, her hair tied neatly in a low bun. She moved softly like she didn't want to disturb anyone. Her job was simple, to clean the rooms after the classes. She swept the floors, wiped down the desks, and made sure the piano keys shone by morning. To most people, she was just another worker, someone whose presence blended into the background. But if anyone ever looked closely, they might have seen something different in her eyes, a kind of warmth and sadness mixed together, like someone who had once known a different life. The piano classroom was her favorite place in the building. Every evening when the students left and silence filled the hall, she lingered there for a while. Sometimes she hummed softly to herself while dusting the piano. Her hands moved carefully, as though she were touching something sacred. When no one was around, she would sit quietly on the piano bench and just stare at the keys. Not playing, not making a sound, just remembering. Mr. Collins, the piano teacher, was a cheerful man in his late 50s. He loved music, but he loved his students more. He believed every child had a spark of talent, and he spent his evenings helping them find it. He had noticed Lena a few times quietly working in the background. She never spoke much, only smiled politely when he greeted her. To him, she was just the cleaner who always made sure his classroom was spotless. He appreciated her work but never thought much beyond that. One cold afternoon, while the piano class was in session, Lena was cleaning the hallway nearby. The sound of the piano drifted through the half-open door. She paused for a moment, listening. The student playing inside was struggling with a piece. The rhythm was uneven, the notes too sharp. Mr. Collins stopped the child gently, correcting their hand position. Lena smiled faintly, remembering how she once sat at a piano, being corrected in the same way. Her mind drifted back to another time, a grand room with shining floors, tall windows, and a younger version of herself sitting before a black grand piano. She could almost hear the echo of her own laughter, the sound of applause, the dreams she once had. But then the sound of the mop bucket rolling snapped her back to reality. She sighed, picked up her broom, and continued her work. The next few weeks passed quietly. Lena's life followed a simple rhythm: wake up early, make tea, walk to the community center, work until sunset, then return home to her small apartment on the edge of town. She didn't have many friends. She didn't talk about her past. The people who worked with her knew very little, and she preferred it that way. Still, every night before going to bed, she thought about the piano. She thought about the feeling of the keys under her fingers and how music once felt like breathing to her. One evening, as she finished mopping the hall, she heard the sound of the piano again. This time it was Mr. Collins himself playing. The melody was soft, beautiful, and full of emotion. She stood by the door listening, almost afraid to move. After a while he stopped and the room went quiet. Lena quietly stepped inside to finish cleaning. Mr. Collins noticed her and smiled. "You always come in right after the music stops," he said kindly. She looked up, a little embarrassed. "It's just when the class ends, sir. I try not to interrupt." "You never interrupt," he said. "Music is meant to be shared, not hidden away." Lena nodded but said nothing. She quickly finished her cleaning and left before he could say more. Still, his words stayed with her all night. The next day, a group of parents came to the center to discuss an upcoming community event, a charity evening where local talents would perform to raise funds for the school. There would be singing, dancing, and a piano recital. Mr. Collins agreed to help organize the music portion. The excitement filled the air. Everyone was talking about who would perform and what songs they would play. Lena listened quietly from the hallway as she dusted the notice board. When she returned home that evening, she found herself unable to sleep. She sat by her small window looking out at the quiet street. The moonlight fell across her face as her fingers traced imaginary piano keys on the edge of the table. She smiled softly, remembering the way music used to make her feel alive. Then, almost shyly, she whispered to herself, "Those days are over." But even as she said it, she didn't truly believe it. The following week, preparations for the event were in full swing. Students practiced every day, parents brought snacks, and decorations filled the halls. Lena was busier than usual, helping set up chairs and cleaning up after rehearsals. Everyone was in a rush. On the day of the event, disaster struck. The pianist scheduled to accompany the choir fell sick. The news spread quickly and panic filled the music room. The children didn't know what to do without music. Mr. Collins rubbed his temples, pacing back and forth. "We can't cancel now," he said. "The whole town is coming tonight." He looked around, desperate for a solution. At that very moment, Lena entered the room with a mop and bucket. She noticed the worried faces and paused. "Is something wrong?" she asked softly. "Our pianist can't come," Mr. Collins said with a sigh. "We need someone who can play at least a few simple pieces for the children to sing along." There was a long silence. Then one of the parents chuckled. "Maybe the cleaning lady can try," he joked lightly, not meaning any harm. A few people laughed. Mr. Collins smiled politely, not taking it seriously. But Lena stood there quietly, her eyes on the piano. For a moment, she looked almost lost in thought. Then, in a calm voice, she said, "I can play a little." The room went silent. Mr. Collins looked surprised. "You can?" "A little," she repeated softly. The parents exchanged amused glances. One of them whispered, "This should be interesting." Mr. Collins, trying to be kind, nodded. "Well, if you think you can help, please. We just need something simple for the children." Lena walked slowly toward the piano. Her heart beat faster with every step. It had been years since she had touched one. She sat down on the bench, straightened her back, and placed her hands gently on the keys. The familiar coldness of the ivory sent a shiver down her spine. She closed her eyes for a second, took a deep breath, and then began to play. At first it was soft, a slow, graceful tune that filled the room like a whisper. Then as her confidence grew, the melody blossomed into something rich and full of emotion. Her fingers danced across the keys with ease, each note flowing into the next. The laughter and murmurs that had filled the room moments before disappeared. Every face turned toward her, frozen in astonishment. The sound was not what anyone expected. It wasn't simple. It wasn't clumsy. It was beautiful, deep, and full of life. Mr. Collins stood still, his eyes wide, as he watched this quiet woman transform before his eyes. The children stared, their mouths open. Even the parents who had laughed were now speechless. When Lena finished, she lifted her hands slowly from the keys. The final note hung in the air like a sigh. The room stayed silent for a moment before a single person began to clap. Then another, and soon the whole room filled with applause. Lena looked around, her cheeks flushed, her eyes glistening. She smiled shyly, unsure of what to do. Mr. Collins stepped forward, his voice almost a whisper. "That was incredible. Where did you learn to play like that?" Lena hesitated. She looked at the piano again, her fingers still trembling slightly. "It's been a long time," she said quietly. "I used to play, a long time ago." The teacher wanted to ask more, but he could see in her eyes that she wasn't ready to talk. So he simply nodded and said, "Well, I think we just found our pianist for tonight." Lena smiled softly and agreed to help. As the others hurried to prepare for the evening, she stayed by the piano, playing a few more soft tunes, lost in her own world. For the first time in many years, she felt something awaken inside her, something she thought was gone forever. That night, when she walked home, the air felt different. The stars shone brighter, and the world seemed a little more alive. She had no idea that what happened that day was just the beginning of something far greater. The town would soon discover who she truly was, but for now she was just Lena, the quiet woman who had played the piano and left everyone speechless. The night of the event arrived with a soft drizzle falling over the small town. Inside the community center, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Families filled the hall, children ran around in bright costumes, and the scent of freshly baked pastries from the food stalls filled the air. The lights from the stage shimmered across the room, giving everything a warm glow. It was the kind of evening that brought everyone together, no matter who they were. Behind the stage, Lena sat quietly near the piano, her hands folded in her lap. She had agreed to play for the children's choir, but her heart raced with a mix of nerves and anticipation. It had been so many years since she had performed in front of people. The last time, she sat before a crowd, She was a young woman with dreams larger than the city she lived in. Now she was just a woman trying to live a simple life, but tonight felt different. Like a small piece of her old self was returning. Mr. Collins approached her with a warm smile. "You ready?" he asked gently. Lena took a deep breath and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." He looked at her for a moment, sensing something beyond the calmness she showed. "You play beautifully," he said. "You must have learned from someone special." Lena smiled faintly. "Yes," she whispered, "from life itself." The audience slowly settled into their seats. The chatter faded as the event began. The host welcomed everyone, introducing the performers one by one. Local singers, dancers, and small musical groups. Each act received warm applause. When it was finally time for the children's choir, Lena's name wasn't even mentioned. The announcement was simple, and now the children's choir accompanied by piano. That was enough for her. She didn't need the attention. As she walked onto the stage, the soft spotlight hit her face. She blinked under the brightness, her heart pounding. The piano stood in the center, polished and elegant. She ran her fingers gently along the edge before sitting down. The children stood beside her, whispering nervously among themselves. Lena turned her head slightly and gave them a reassuring smile. Then she began to play. The first note rose softly, then another followed, forming a melody so tender, it silenced the audience immediately. The children started to sing, their young voices blending beautifully with Lena's gentle playing. Each key she pressed carried emotion, the kind that comes only from deep within. It wasn't just music. It was a story of pain, love, and rediscovered hope. As the final verse came to an end, Lena slowed her rhythm, letting the last notes linger in the air like a soft goodbye. The audience sat motionless, soaking in the beauty they had just witnessed. Then the applause came, not hurried or forced, but long, heartfelt, and full of admiration. Lena stood up slowly and gave a small bow, her eyes glistening. She wasn't used to attention anymore, but in that moment she felt something warm and alive. Mr. Collins stepped forward, shaking her hand with genuine emotion in his eyes. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. "You played like someone who's lived every note." Lena only smiled. "Maybe I have." After the show ended, people gathered around to congratulate the performers. Some came to thank Lena personally. Parents who had barely noticed her before now looked at her with newfound respect. Children tugged at her sleeve, saying how beautiful the piano sounded. She responded with humility, her voice soft, her smile kind. One elderly woman who had been sitting in the front row approached her and said, "My dear, I haven't heard music like that in years. You have a gift. Don't let it go unseen again." Lena's eyes softened. "Thank you," she said, her voice almost breaking. "That means more than you know." Later that night, when everyone had left and the hall grew quiet again, Lena stayed behind to help clean up. She picked up leftover programs, folded chairs, and swept the floor. Mr. Collins returned from the back room, still amazed by what had happened. He leaned against the doorway and watched her for a moment before speaking. "You know," he said gently, "I've been teaching piano for 30 years, and I've never heard someone play with that much feeling. Not even from professionals." Lena chuckled softly, not turning around. "I used to play a long time ago. Life took me in a different direction." "Different direction?" he repeated, curious. "What do you mean?" She stopped sweeping, leaning on the broom. For a moment she said nothing, lost in thought. Then she spoke quietly. "There was a time when music was my whole world. I studied it, lived it, dreamed it. But then things changed. My mother got sick. I had to take care of her. One day turned into years, and music became something I could only remember." Mr. Collins nodded slowly, understanding the pain behind her words. "That must have been hard." "It was," she admitted, "but I don't regret it. I did what I had to do." She smiled faintly. "Still, sometimes when I see a piano, I feel like I'm seeing an old friend I left behind." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Maybe that friend never left you," he said. "Maybe it was just waiting for you to return." Lena glanced at the piano, her eyes distant. "Maybe," she whispered. From that night on, something changed. Lena still came to work each day as usual, cleaning and organizing the rooms, but now the others saw her differently. The parents greeted her with respect. The children smiled wider when they saw her. Even Mr. Collins seemed to light up when she entered the music room. She wasn't invisible anymore. One afternoon when classes ended early, Mr. Collins invited her to sit and play for a few minutes. "No one's here," he said kindly. "Just us and the music." She hesitated but eventually agreed. Sitting down again, she began to play softly, a melody she had composed herself years ago but never finished. Mr. Collins listened quietly, moved by every note. When she stopped, he said, "You could teach these kids more than I ever could. You play from the heart. They need to see that." Lena laughed lightly. "I'm not a teacher." "You don't need to be one," he replied. "You just need to share what you already have." The thought stayed with her long after she left that day. That night at home, she took out an old wooden box from under her bed. Inside were yellowed sheet music papers, photos, and a faded concert program with her name printed on it. Seeing it brought back memories she had buried deep, the long rehearsals, the bright lights of the stage, and the applause that once felt like magic. She traced her finger over her name and smiled softly. The next morning, she brought the papers to the community center. When Mr. Collins saw them, his eyes widened. "You were a performer?" Lena nodded shyly. "A long time ago. I was supposed to tour, but life decided otherwise." He looked at her with deep respect. "Then you don't just belong behind a broom, Lena. You belong behind this piano." His words touched her deeply. That evening, she stayed back after everyone left and played again, not for anyone else, but for herself. The notes echoed through the empty hall, filling every corner with warmth and emotion. For the first time in years, she felt whole again. The next week, Mr. Collins invited her to help with the advanced piano class. At first, she refused. "I don't want to take anyone's place," she said. But he assured her it was just to guide a few students who struggled. She finally agreed. The children loved her immediately. She was patient, gentle, and understood the fear of making mistakes. One of the shy students, a boy who barely spoke, smiled for the first time when Lena showed him how to play a simple tune correctly. Mr. Collins watched from a distance, smiling proudly. It was clear she had a gift not just for music but for touching hearts. As days turned into weeks, word spread about the mysterious woman who played like a dream. People began to drop by the center just to hear her during practice sessions. Some even asked if she gave private lessons. Lena was overwhelmed but grateful. For her, it wasn't about fame or recognition anymore. It was about sharing what once gave her purpose. One quiet afternoon, as she closed the piano lid, Mr. Collins walked in with an envelope. "The town committee wants to organize another concert," he said with a smile. "This time they want you to be the main performer." Lena's eyes widened. "Me? No, I can't. I'm not ready for that." He chuckled softly. "You're more than ready. They all saw what you did that night. You reminded them what real music feels like." She didn't answer right away. Her gaze fell on the piano, the same one that had been silent for so long before she came. After a long pause, she looked back at him and said, "Maybe it's time." That evening, she walked home under a sky full of stars. The air was cool and the sound of her footsteps echoed softly on the pavement. She thought about how life had changed in such a short time, from a quiet woman who cleaned the floors to someone who had brought a town together with her music. As she turned the corner toward her street, she whispered to herself, "It's never too late to begin again." And for the first time in years, she believed it. The days following the announcement of the concert passed quickly, and the community center was busier than ever. The townspeople couldn't stop talking about the woman who had surprised everyone with her piano performance. Flyers were placed on notice boards, and the event was even mentioned in the local newspaper. It wasn't just another small-town concert anymore. People were genuinely curious to see the woman who had once been just a cleaner, but now had everyone's admiration. Lena, however, didn't seek attention. She continued her work as usual, keeping her daily routine simple. She still came in early, swept the hallways, arranged chairs, and helped the children during their practice sessions. Yet something inside her had changed. She felt alive again, as if the music had awakened a part of her soul that had been asleep for years. Whenever she played the piano now, her heart felt lighter. Mr. Collins watched her closely these days, noticing how her confidence had started to bloom again. One afternoon, as she finished helping a student, he approached her and said, "You know, Lena, you have something special. When you play, people listen, not just with their ears but with their hearts." She smiled modestly. Thank you, but I'm not sure I deserve all this attention. He chuckled. Sometimes the world needs to be reminded of hidden beauty. And you, my friend, are part of that reminder. Lena didn't know what to say. Compliments had become rare in her life. She wasn't used to being seen this way, but she appreciated his kindness. In the evenings, after everyone left, she often stayed back to practice. The soft light from the lamps gave the room a warm glow, and the sound of her piano filled the quiet space. There was peace in those moments, a feeling she couldn't describe. Sometimes she would pause mid-song, her hands resting on the keys, and close her eyes as memories of her past returned. She remembered concert halls, audiences cheering, and her mother sitting proudly in the front row. A tear or two would escape, but she would smile through it. The music had brought her pain once, but it was also bringing her healing now. As the day of the concert grew closer, the entire town got involved in preparations. The hall was decorated with lights and flowers. Posters with her name, Lena, A Journey Through Music, hung on every wall. Mr. Collins had chosen her as the main performer, and she would be playing 3 pieces that evening, each one representing a chapter of her life. The first would symbolize loss, the second hope, and the last rebirth. When she first heard his plan, she was hesitant. "That sounds like a lot," she said quietly. "I don't know if I can do all that." He looked at her reassuringly. "You already have. You just need to let the audience hear it." The night before the concert, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat by her small window again, looking at the moon hanging low in the sky. The city lights in the distance flickered faintly. She placed her hand over her heart, feeling it beat faster than usual. "Can I really do this again?" she whispered to herself. But deep down she knew she had to try. Not for fame or praise, but for the love she once had for music and the part of herself she wanted to reclaim. The morning of the concert was bright and full of energy. Everyone at the community center was busy. Children practiced their songs, volunteers arranged chairs, and Mr. Collins walked around giving directions. Lena arrived quietly, wearing a simple but elegant dress, a soft cream color that made her look graceful yet humble. When she walked into the hall, people turned and smiled warmly. Some even clapped softly in encouragement. She smiled back, trying to hide her nervousness. "It's just another evening," she whispered to herself, though she knew this night meant far more than that. Backstage, she sat in silence, listening to the muffled sound of the crowd outside. Her hands trembled slightly, and she rubbed them together to calm herself. Mr. Collins came in and handed her a small bouquet of flowers. "You're going to be wonderful," he said sincerely. Lena looked up at him, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." He smiled softly. "You believed first. You just forgot for a while." As the curtains lifted, the lights dimmed, and the audience fell silent. Mr. Collins stepped onto the stage to introduce her. "Tonight," he began, "we are not just celebrating music, but the spirit of resilience, the beauty of rediscovered dreams, and the reminder that talent never truly fades. Please welcome someone who has touched all our hearts, Lena." The applause that followed was gentle yet full of admiration. Lena walked slowly to the piano, her steps steady but her heart racing. She took her seat, adjusted the bench, and closed her eyes for a brief moment before beginning. The first piece she played was slow and melancholic, telling the story of her years of silence. Each note was like a whisper of memories, her mother's illness, the struggles she faced, and the loneliness that had followed. The audience sat completely still, some with tears in their eyes, feeling the pain hidden within the melody. When she finished, there was a soft silence before applause erupted. Lena smiled, bowed her head slightly, and took a deep breath before starting the second piece. This one was brighter, full of warmth and hope. The rhythm was uplifting, symbolizing her return to music and the kindness she found in the small-town community. Her fingers moved gracefully, and for a moment it seemed like the piano itself was alive. The audience swayed gently, lost in the beauty of her playing. Finally came the last piece, a powerful melody that began softly but grew stronger with every passing moment. It represented her rebirth, the rediscovery of her purpose, and the joy of living again. The hall filled with energy as her hands moved faster, more confidently. When the last note rang out, it echoed through the room like a promise. The entire audience stood to their feet, clapping and cheering. Some shouted her name. Lena stood slowly, overwhelmed with emotion. She placed her hand on her heart and bowed deeply. Mr. Collins joined her on stage, tears in his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said proudly, "a true artist." After the performance, people surrounded her, wanting to shake her hand, take pictures, or simply tell her how much her music moved them. For someone who had once lived in silence, the love she received that night was almost too much to take in, but she accepted it with grace, thanking everyone with humility. When the crowd finally thinned, she sat alone at the piano once more. The lights had dimmed, and the hall was quiet again. She touched the keys gently, playing a few soft notes just for herself. Mr. Collins approached quietly from behind. "You did it," he said softly. She looked up at him with a peaceful smile. "We did it. You gave me a reason to try again." He shook his head. "No, Lena, you gave yourself that reason. I just opened the door." She laughed lightly, her eyes shining. "Maybe. But sometimes that's all a person needs, someone to open the door." As she packed up her sheet music, Mr. Collins asked, "What will you do now? Go back to performing full-time?" Lena paused, thinking for a moment. "Maybe someday," she said thoughtfully. "But for now, I think I'd like to stay here. This place reminds me why I fell in love with music in the first place. It's not about stages or fame. It's about connection. It's about people." He nodded in agreement. "You've already taught us more than any book ever could." In the following days, the concert became the talk of the town. Videos of her performance spread on social media, gaining thousands of views. People from nearby cities started calling the community center, asking about her. Some even invited her to perform at bigger venues, but Lena didn't rush to accept any offers. She was content where she was. Every morning, she still came early to the center, helped with cleaning, and played music for anyone who wanted to listen. One afternoon, a little girl from the choir ran up to her and said, "Miss Lena, I want to play like you when I grow up." Lena knelt down, smiling warmly. "You can, sweetheart. Just remember, music isn't about being perfect. It's about telling your story." The girl nodded seriously and hugged her before running off. Watching her go, Lena's heart swelled with joy. She realized that perhaps her greatest purpose wasn't performing. It was inspiring others to find their own music. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat at the piano once more. The hall was empty, but the notes she played filled every corner with light. They spoke of her journey, her pain, and her triumph. They spoke of a woman who had lost herself and found her way back through music. When she finished, she looked up at the quiet room and whispered softly, "Thank you." It wasn't clear who she was thanking, perhaps her late mother, perhaps life itself, but her voice carried peace. Outside, the night was calm. The lights of the town glowed softly in the distance. Lena walked home with a light heart, knowing that her story wasn't over. It had just begun again, one note at a time. After the concert, Lena's life slowly began to change in ways she had never expected. She returned to her routine at the community center, cleaning and organizing, helping the children practice, and playing soft music for anyone who wanted to listen. But now the whispers and curious glances from townspeople followed her everywhere. People she had never spoken to before nodded respectfully, and some even stopped her in the hallway to ask questions about her music. Despite the attention, Lena remained humble. She never boasted about her talent, never sought praise, and often tried to slip into the background like she always had. But there were moments when her curiosity about her own life and past began to surface. The music that had been a part of her soul for years was stirring memories she had kept hidden. Each time she touched the piano, she remembered long-forgotten lessons, concerts, and moments of triumph, mixed with her sacrifices and the years she had spent away from the spotlight. One afternoon, Mr. Collins approached her as she was finishing cleaning the piano room. He looked unusually serious, a small envelope in his hand. "Lena, someone came by to see you today," he said. She tilted her head curiously. "Who?" she asked softly. He handed her the envelope. "It's from someone who knew you a long time ago. They saw the video of your performance and wanted to reconnect." Lena hesitated, her fingers brushing against the envelope. She hadn't expected her past to find her in such a quiet town. With a deep breath, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from an old mentor, someone who had believed in her abilities when she was just starting out. The letter spoke of her talent, the opportunities she had been given, and encouragement to continue pursuing her music. It also included a few invitations to perform in the city again, but the tone was gentle, almost understanding of her past choices. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the words. Memories she had buried for years resurfaced. The late nights practicing, the applause, the bright lights, and her mother's proud eyes in the audience. She had chosen a different path, one of quiet sacrifice, and now that path had led her here, back to music, but in a way she had never imagined. Mr. Collins watched her silently, sensing the conflict within her. "You don't have to answer now," he said softly. "But remember, the world hasn't forgotten you. Your music has a way of touching people no matter where you play." Lena nodded, clutching the letter close to her heart. She didn't speak immediately, choosing instead to place it in her bag for safekeeping. That evening she sat at the piano, the quiet of the empty hall enveloping her. She ran her fingers over the keys, feeling the familiar warmth beneath her touch. The letter rested beside her, and for the first time in many years she allowed herself to think about what might have been and what could still be. Her music that night was different. It was no longer just a reflection of her emotions, but a conversation with her past. Each note carried the weight of her choices, her sacrifices, and the love she had for music. It was soft and gentle at first, then it grew stronger, more confident and full of hope. The piano seemed to understand her, responding to every touch with warmth. When she finally stopped, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. In the days that followed, Lena began receiving more letters and messages. Some were from former students and colleagues who had watched the video online, expressing admiration and curiosity. Others were from people she hadn't spoken to in years, including a few who had tried to encourage her to pursue her career long ago. Each message was a reminder of the life she had once lived and the talent she still carried within her. One afternoon, as she was arranging chairs for a rehearsal, a young boy from the advanced piano class approached her hesitantly. "Miss Lena, can I ask you something?" he said. She smiled warmly. "Of course. What is it?" "Were you really a performer?" he asked softly, his eyes wide with curiosity. Lena paused, considering how much to share. She knelt down to be at his level. "Yes, a long time ago. But life sometimes takes us on paths we don't expect. I had to step away from performing for a while." The boy nodded slowly. "But you play like one. You inspire me." Her heart swelled with a quiet joy. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a lot to me. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about sharing what you feel inside." Word continued to spread about Lena's talent. People from neighboring towns began visiting the community center just to hear her play. Some came to take lessons, while others simply came to listen. Lena found herself playing for larger and larger audiences, though she still preferred the intimate, quiet moments where she could connect with the music and the people around her. Every performance, every note, reminded her why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. One evening, after a long day of practice and teaching, Lena found herself alone in the piano room. The soft light from the lamps cast shadows on the walls, and the room was filled with the familiar scent of polished wood. She sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to play freely, without thinking about an audience or a performance. The music flowed naturally, a reflection of her soul. Each note carried a story, a memory, a hope. As she played, she thought about her mother, who had always supported her dreams, even in silence. She thought about the sacrifices she had made, the years spent caring for her family and the life she had chosen. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release, of recognition, and of newfound strength. When she finished, she sat quietly for a moment, letting the silence fill the room. Then she whispered softly, "I'm ready to move forward now." It wasn't a declaration to anyone else, but to herself. She knew that the path ahead might be uncertain, but for the first time in years, she felt prepared to face it. The following week, she received a call from her old mentor, inviting her to perform at a small recital in the city. Lena listened carefully, considering the offer. She realized that she didn't have to abandon her life in the town to embrace her talent. She could find a balance, performing when she felt ready, while still keeping the community center and the children close to her heart. She accepted the invitation, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It would be a chance to reconnect with a part of her past, but also to show herself that she could reclaim her life on her own terms. Mr. Collins was supportive, helping her prepare and offering encouragement every step of the way. On the day of her departure for the city, the children from the piano class gathered around her, holding small handmade cards and flowers. They wished her luck, hugged her tightly, and told her how proud they were. Lena felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in a long time. She promised them she would return and continue teaching, ensuring that her love for music would inspire the next generation. As she walked out of the community center, she looked back one last time. The familiar halls, the piano, the smell of polish, it had all been a part of her journey, shaping her into the person she had become. She smiled softly, knowing that no matter where she went, this place would always be her home. The drive to the city was quiet, the hum of the car engine matching the rhythm of her thoughts. She thought about the performance ahead, the people she would meet, and the opportunities that awaited. But more than that, she thought about herself, the woman who had returned to music, who had found her voice again, and who was finally ready to embrace her talent fully. When she arrived in the city, she was greeted warmly by her old mentor. The rehearsal space was bright and elegant, filled with pianos, music stands, and other performers preparing for the evening. Lena felt a flutter of nerves, but also a strong sense of determination. She had been given a second chance, and she intended to make the most of it. As she practiced, she found that the years away from performance had not dulled her skill. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, and her interpretations of the pieces were filled with depth and emotion. The music she played was no longer just technical. It told a story, her story, with every note. When the recital began, Lena walked onto the stage with a calm confidence. The lights were bright, the audience attentive, and the atmosphere charged with anticipation. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and began to play. The first notes filled the hall, soft and tender, capturing the audience's attention immediately. As the music progressed, it grew stronger, more expressive, and full of passion. The audience was captivated, transported by the story she told through her hands. By the end of the performance, the audience was on its feet, applauding and cheering with admiration. Lena bowed deeply, tears of gratitude in her eyes. She had reclaimed a part of herself that she thought was lost forever. The city, once a place of dreams and pressures, now welcomed her with open arms, celebrating not just her talent but the journey she had taken to get there. After the recital, she received messages from friends, mentors, and music lovers praising her performance. Invitations for future recitals, collaborations, and teaching opportunities began to pour in. Lena knew she had choices to make, but she also knew that she would always stay true to the music, to the people she loved, and to herself. That night, as she looked out from the hotel window at the city lights, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced her past, embraced her talent, and found a new path forward. Music had given her a voice again, and she intended to use it fully, not for fame, but for the joy and inspiration it brought to herself and others. Lena whispered softly to herself, feeling the weight of years lifted from her shoulders. This is just the beginning. And for the first time in a long while, she believed it completely, ready to face whatever came next with courage, grace, and a heart full of music. After the recital in the city, Lena returned to her small town with a quiet pride that she had never felt before. The journey had reminded her of the person she once was and the woman she had become. The community center, the children, the halls filled with the scent of polish and old wood, they were all waiting for her, and she was eager to be home. The simplicity of her life brought her peace, and she knew that this was where her heart truly belonged. The children were overjoyed to see her return. They crowded around her, asking questions about the city, the recital, and the music she had played. Lena knelt down to listen to their excited chatter, laughing softly as they shared their stories. She realized how much she had missed these moments, the small joys, the innocence, and the enthusiasm that reminded her of why she loved music in the first place. Mr. Collins greeted her warmly, his eyes reflecting pride and admiration. "Welcome back," he said simply. "I hope the city treated you well." "It did," Lena replied, smiling. "But it's good to be home. There's a comfort here I can't find anywhere else." Life slowly returned to its rhythm, but now there was a new energy in Lena. She continued her work at the center, but she also began to spend more time with the children in the advanced class. She taught them techniques, shared her stories, and encouraged them to express themselves through music. Her presence inspired them, and they listened with rapt attention whenever she played. One afternoon, as the class ended, a young girl approached Lena hesitantly. "Miss Lena," she said softly, "do you think I can really become a musician one day?" Lena smiled gently and held the girl's hand. "You can," she replied. "Music is about what you feel, not just what you play. If you listen to your heart and practice with love, anything is possible." The girl's eyes shone and she nodded eagerly. Lena felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet satisfaction that she was making a difference not through fame, but through connection and guidance. In the following weeks, Lena's performances became more frequent. She didn't seek large stages or crowds, but word of her talent continued to spread. Visitors came from neighboring towns eager to hear her play, and sometimes she would be invited to perform at small gatherings or community events. Each performance was a chance to reconnect with herself and her music, and she approached each one with humility and grace. One evening, as she sat in the quiet piano room after everyone had left, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The memories of her past, the struggles, and the moments of doubt all seemed to fade into the background. The music she played now was infused with experience, emotion, and wisdom. She understood the true power of music, not just as a performance, but as a bridge between hearts. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Mr. Collins holding a letter with an official-looking seal. "This came for you today," he said, handing it over. Lena carefully opened it. Inside was an invitation to a national music festival. The letter explained that her performance in the city had caught the attention of the organizers, who wanted her to participate as a featured performer. It was a prestigious opportunity, one that could have taken her career to new heights. She sat quietly, absorbing the news. The thought of performing on a national stage was both thrilling and intimidating. She looked at Mr. Collins, who watched her patiently. "You don't have to decide now," he said softly. "But remember, they are inviting you because of who you are and the music you create." Lena nodded, her mind swirling with possibilities. She knew that this was a chance to challenge herself, but she also understood the importance of staying true to the life she had rebuilt. She didn't want to lose the peace she had found in the small town and the connection with the children who had become like her family. Over the next few days, she pondered the decision carefully. She walked through the town, observing the familiar streets, the quiet park, and the smiling faces of the townspeople. She realized that her music had meaning not just in grand halls, but in the hearts she touched daily. The festival could wait, she thought. She wanted to focus on nurturing her students and continuing to share her music where it mattered most. The children noticed her thoughtful mood and asked her why she seemed distant. Lena smiled at them. "I'm thinking about some opportunities," she said gently. "But remember, no matter where I go, music will always bring me back to you all." Their innocent understanding brought her comfort. They didn't need her to perform for the world. They simply needed her presence, her guidance, and her love for music. Lena realized that her impact was far greater than fame or accolades. It was the lives she touched, the dreams she inspired, and the hope she instilled in young hearts. In the weeks that followed, Lena organized a small recital for the children at the community center. The event was simple, intimate, and filled with warmth. Parents, friends, and neighbors gathered to listen as the children performed pieces they had learned under her guidance. Lena played alongside them, her music weaving seamlessly with theirs, creating moments of joy, laughter, and sometimes tears. As she watched the children perform, Lena felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She understood that her true calling was not only to play music, but to inspire others to find their own voices. She remembered the young version of herself, full of dreams and possibilities, and smiled. Through her teaching and performances, she was passing on the gift she had been given, ensuring that music continued to thrive in the hearts of others. After the recital, the hall was filled with applause and heartfelt thanks. Lena thanked the children individually, giving each one a small note of encouragement. She felt proud of their growth, their courage, and their dedication. It was a reminder that music was more than notes and rhythms. It was connection, expression, and love. In the quiet of the evening, Lena sat alone at the piano, reflecting on her journey. The path had not been easy. There had been sacrifices, doubts, and moments of fear, but every step had led her to this point, where she could embrace her talent, inspire others, and find peace within herself. She ran her fingers over the keys, playing softly, each note a testament to her resilience, her love for music, and the life she had chosen. As the night drew on, Lena thought about the future. There would be new opportunities, challenges, and experiences ahead. She knew she could face them with courage and grace, guided by the music that had always been a part of her soul. And she understood that no matter where life took her, the small town, the community center, and the children would always be her anchor. Lena whispered softly to herself, a smile touching her lips. Music has brought me home, and it will guide me forward. In that moment, she felt whole, confident, and ready for whatever the future held, knowing that her journey was far from over, but that every note she played was a step forward into a life filled with purpose, love, and music. The evening had ended, but its magic stayed in the air long after the last note faded. The community hall was slowly emptying, yet no one seemed to want to leave. People kept whispering about the simple woman who had just played like a dream. Some said she must have been a professional. Others thought she was just someone who carried deep emotion in her soul. The teacher stood near the stage, his heart full. He couldn't believe what he had witnessed that night. That woman who came to the hall weeks ago looking like a quiet visitor had just changed the atmosphere of the whole town. She stood near the piano, her fingers resting gently on the edge of it, almost afraid to let go. The sound of applause was still echoing in her ears. For years she had stayed away from music because it reminded her of pain, but now the same piano keys felt like healing. The teacher walked toward her with a warm smile. "You did something special tonight," he said softly. She looked down, still trying to hide the small smile that escaped her lips. "I only played what I felt," she replied. Her voice was calm but full of emotion. When the hall finally emptied, the teacher offered to walk her home. The cool night breeze brushed against their faces as they walked side by side. The street was quiet except for the soft sound of their footsteps. "I didn't know music could still make me feel this alive," she said after a long pause. "For years I thought I had lost it forever." The teacher looked at her gently. "You never lost it," he said. "You just needed a reason to find it again." She looked at him for a moment and nodded. There was something true in his words, something she hadn't allowed herself to believe for a long time. Over the next few days, people in town kept talking about her performance. Someone had recorded it on their phone and the video started spreading online. Within days, thousands of people watched it. They called her the mysterious woman with the golden touch. Some recognized her face from old posters and interviews. Messages started coming in from journalists and old fans who couldn't believe she was still alive, much less performing again. But she didn't rush to answer anyone. She wasn't ready for fame again. All she wanted was peace, and the piano had finally given that back to her. When she returned to the community center the following week, the teacher greeted her with the same smile. "You're famous again," he joked, holding up his phone with the video on the screen. She laughed softly. "Maybe, but this time I'm not running toward it." She paused for a moment. "I just want to stay where music feels pure." The teacher nodded in agreement. "Then stay here," he said. "Teach the students. They could learn more from you than from any book." Her eyes softened. She hadn't thought about teaching before. For so long, she believed her story ended the day she walked away from the stage. But now, standing in that small room filled with laughter and piano keys, she realized maybe her story was only changing, not ending. She agreed to help with a few lessons. At first, she was quiet and unsure, but as days passed, her confidence grew again. The students loved her calm way of teaching. She didn't scold or demand perfection. Instead, she taught them to feel the music, to let every note carry a piece of their heart. One afternoon, a little girl struggled to play a simple melody. The woman sat beside her, guiding her hands gently. "Don't think of the notes," she said softly. "Think of the feeling." The girl closed her eyes and tried again, and suddenly the tune sounded sweeter. The woman smiled. In that moment, she saw herself in that little girl, nervous, curious, full of dreams. For the first time in years, she felt proud of herself again. Not for being famous, but for giving someone else the gift that once saved her. As weeks went by, she became a quiet legend in town. People often stopped by the center just to hear her play or catch a glimpse of her smile. But she never bragged, never spoke about her past. When people asked about her life before, she only said, "I used to play a lot, but now I play with peace." The teacher often watched her from afar, amazed at how someone who had once hidden from the world now became a light for so many. She had transformed pain into something beautiful. One evening after class, the teacher found her sitting alone at the piano again. The lights were dim, and the hall was silent except for the faint sound of her playing. He sat quietly at the back, listening. The melody was slow and tender, filled with hope. When she finished, she turned and noticed him there. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. She smiled and replied, "I used to play for crowds. Now I play for myself. It feels different, better." He nodded. "Sometimes the smallest stage brings the biggest truth," he said. They both smiled, understanding each other without needing more words. That night, as she walked home, she looked up at the sky. It was clear, and the stars shone like 1,000 tiny lights. She thought about the teacher, the students, and the joy she had found again. She realized she didn't need bright lights or huge stages anymore. The music was inside her, and that was enough. For years she had believed her purpose was gone, but now she knew it had only changed form. It was no longer about being seen. It was about touching hearts quietly, one song at a time. Months passed, and the community center became known for its music classes. Students from nearby towns started joining. Some came because they had seen the viral video and wanted to meet the woman who played with such emotion. She welcomed them all with kindness, but never mentioned her fame. The teacher often introduced her simply as, "Our friend who loves the piano." That humility made people respect her even more. One day, the teacher surprised her with an idea. "What if we hold another concert?" he suggested. She froze for a second. "Another one?" she asked nervously. He smiled. "Not like before. This one's for the students. You can help them perform." She thought about it for a while. "All right," she said finally, "but I won't be the star this time." He laughed. "That's fine. The music will be." The concert day arrived. The hall was packed again, filled with families, friends, and people who loved music. The students performed one by one, each carrying a spark of the passion she had shared with them. She watched from the side of the stage, her heart swelling with pride. Near the end, the teacher asked her to join for one final duet. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. When she sat down beside him, the audience clapped softly. Together they played a melody simple but full of life. Their hands moved in perfect rhythm, teacher and friend creating something that felt pure and timeless. When the final note ended, the hall erupted in applause again, but this time she didn't shy away. She stood, smiled, and bowed with grace. After the concert, people gathered around to thank her. Some shared how her story had inspired them to chase their forgotten dreams. One young man said he had quit music years ago but started again after seeing her video. She listened to each story with tears in her eyes. It amazed her how her pain had turned into hope for others. The teacher watched from a distance, proud and thankful that their paths had crossed. He knew she had given the town something priceless, a reason to believe in second chances. Later that night, the teacher locked up the hall and found her still sitting on the steps outside. "You stayed," he said with a smile. She nodded. "I just wanted to listen to the quiet for a while." He sat beside her. "You've changed this place," he said. She shook her head gently. "No, this place changed me." They both laughed softly, the sound mixing with the gentle night wind. She looked at him with warmth in her eyes and said, "Thank you for asking me to play that first day. You didn't know who I was, but you saw me anyway." The teacher looked at her, his eyes kind. "Sometimes," he said, "the world hides its brightest lights in the most ordinary places." The town never forgot her. Her story became something people shared when they spoke about hope, kindness, and rediscovering joy. She continued teaching, helping others find their music, not just in instruments but in life itself. And every now and then, when the hall was empty, she would play alone, her fingers dancing over the keys with a gentle smile. The notes would fill the quiet space, carrying warmth, memory, and peace. Her life was no longer about being a starlet or a name on posters. It was about being real, being present, and reminding others that even the quietest souls can hold the loudest songs inside them. The teacher often said to new students, "Once I asked a simple woman to play the piano. I didn't know she would change everything." And whenever she heard him say it, she would smile and think to herself, maybe music didn't just return to her life. Maybe all along it had been waiting for her to return to it.